Hi! This video is going to be some quick tips and a play along about this piece, the Air Varie, or Air Variations. I'm just going to cover the first page. There's a lot to the 2 pages, so this one's just going to be a quick video on the first page, which is a lot to work on. And hopefully later I can do another video on the second page. So this piece is variations, as it says in the name, fancy way of saying variations. And we have a basic theme, so that's the first 4 measures, and it's very simple, just straight half notes. And then each variation takes those basic notes and embellishes them or develops them a little bit further, and each one gets a little bit more interesting, okay? So this is just going to be quick tips. I'm not going to give a full tutorial on this one. This is just to help those of you that are working on it that need a little extra guidance and a play along at a slow tempo, because we have to play this at a slow tempo first before we can play it at a fast tempo. So this is a very beginner video for this piece. If you're just starting this piece, this is good for you. Okay, so for the theme and the first variation and the second variation, I would say good things to work on here would be using WBs, which is whole bows. Okay, so when I write WB, that means whole bow. Okay, vibrato, or sometimes I'll just put vib. Okay, just for short. We need abbreviations so it's easier to write and in small spaces. So vibrato we're going to work on here, and if you're working on vibrato, feel free to do this very slow. The goal is just to loosen up your fingers. So when I play this for you, I'll demonstrate that. Okay, so don't worry if the vibrato is not perfectly developed. Just try to wiggle on every single note as loosely as possible and get your fingers wiggling in the right direction, even if it's not fast. It's better to have slow vibrato than to a slow vibrato with the right motion than it is to do a really tight and incorrect vibrato. And I think most of us can tell when we're doing that and it's not really giving us the sound we want. We need to back off completely and do something totally different, which is to go slow but with the right motion. And pretty quickly the hand will start to understand the motion and the vibrato will start to become faster and more the sound that we're looking for. Patience takes patience. In variation 3, I thought I would just highlight that it says martelé, and I'll demonstrate that, but it's not a true bounce. It's more of a stop on the string, and it really comes from the elbow. So I'll demonstrate that. That would be in variation 3. In variation 4, I put these little stars here, circled these notes, these downbeats, meaning to make magic on those notes. So those of you that are my students know what that means. It means that we're going to taper the end of the note, and I'll demonstrate that. But I'm going to taper the end of this note and let it die away just very gently, and just have a tiny little space before I begin this. That gives me a little space to move my finger, to get my bow and my fingers ready for the next thing. And some of this, it doesn't seem very necessary, but some of them you have to shift between the 2 places and change strings. So that little tiny bit of making magic helps us, gives a little space to get ready for the next thing. And probably if I didn't tell you I was doing it, you wouldn't even notice. So that's the beauty of making magic and creating a little space. It's a little hack for us to get from one place to the next. Okay. So variation 5 is just a charging through this and trying to keep the bow even and in the middle of the bow, middle to upper middle part of the bow. We're just cranking along, and to not allow the bow to slow down or lighten up in these places where we may shift or the notes get a little bit more complicated. So that is something that we would work on in lesson extensively. So for sure, this is the part that we have to drill with a metronome at an even slower tempo than what I'm going to do right now to get it to the basic tempo that I'm going to play for you. a good beginning tempo would probably be 50 to 55. That's a slow tempo, okay? Um, and 50 to 55 is going to feel really slow in these first few variations. But you got to stick with it because once we get to here, it's not going to feel that slow when you're first starting out. So what we can't do is play the first part really, really fast and then slow way down for this one and then go fast again when we get to another one that we can play easier. Because then it just sounds sort of wonky and the rhythm is all over the place. So we need a steady rhythm, and we're going to set that tempo based on how fast we can play the most difficult thing. So on this page, your most difficult thing is probably variation 5 and a little variation 9. Those would be your fastest things that would probably slow you down, right? So we can only play variation 1 as fast as we can play variation 5 or 9. Okay? So most of us need to drill variation 9, variation 5, and any other one that's slowing you down to get it to a certain speed. So in this case, we'll say 50, somewhere between 50 and 60. Okay? Would be a good starting slow tempo. It is faster than that, but we have to get the whole thing in one speed before we can move it in that direction. Okay, so what else? Variation 6, we're going to do whole bows again. So this should feel very much like the first one, the theme. We're going to have whole bows here too, but it's decorated. Now we've got double stops and we have well, that's a big double stop. You're playing moving notes against an open string. So it's a variation of a double stop. So it's more fancy. It's a fancy way of doing that theme right there. But the bow really is doing the same thing that it was doing in the theme. Okay, so I'll demonstrate that. In variation 7, this one is very much like variation 4. We're going to make magic on that first downbeat note of each measure and give just a little space, a little taper after this note to allow the hand and the bow to get over to this and get started. It's so subtle, you wouldn't even notice it and people won't hear it, but it'll help you to get there. And especially if you need to shift like we do here. We shift and we need a little space to get there. Okay? If we move on, variation 8, rhythm. So after playing these quicker variation where there's a lot of movement, we suddenly get to variation 8. And yes, we're concentrating on the pizzicato, but it really slows down. The rhythm is very slow. So you definitely want to feel the beat right there and make sure that you're stopping in the rest and that the notes that you do have are on the beat. And then it will have shape. So if we don't keep track of the rhythm right there, it won't have shape and it won't really make sense. You won't hear the melody, okay? So rhythm's really important. And these are gentle pizzicatos and sort of a rolling pizzicato. It's not super slow, but it's gentle. So you shouldn't be working too hard here. Your left hand will be working a little bit more than the right hand. Okay, and then in variation 9, we have this fun little thing. This run of 16th notes, okay? And that's going to happen a few times. And when we have that run of 16th notes, what we want, here's a fancy term, even distribution, okay? So even distribution of the bow. That means, let's see, where's my bow? That means that, I can't do this in the camera this way. So that means that you have 8 notes and totaling 2 beats, okay? Each one of those groups of 4 is 1 beat, 1 E-anda, 2 E-anda. So the first 4 notes should be in the first half of the bow, and the last 4 notes should be in the top half of the bow, or actually it goes up bow. So the first 4 notes would be in the top half of the bow, and the second 4 notes would be in the bottom half. So, and roughly you want to divide that half into 4. So if, if trying to get this to where it's in the camera, if you've got half your bow, you need to 1, 2, 3, 4, basically. You're trying to divide it so that you've got 8 little segments that evenly are distributed along the bow. So what we don't want is to do all 8 notes in this much bow. We're trying to get all the way to the frog and evenly. And we don't want to do, let's say, 6 notes and we're only here and in the first top part of the bow, and we do the last 2 notes for the rest of the bow. So we're trying to make it nice and even all the way down the bow. I can demonstrate that better when I back up from the camera. And also that these should be whole bows. Okay, it might be a little less than whole bow when you go faster, but at the slower speed, you're going to have a whole bow for each one, and each bow is 2 beats. So the first one is 2 beats, and then all 8 notes here are slurred together, totaling 2 beats. So it's a whole bow down and a whole bow up, even though this one is busy and this one is not. The bow is really kind of doing the same thing. Okay, then we get down to this last variation 10, and what I wrote here was to keep note of what it says, con grazia, so with grace. So it's sort of graceful and light, it's piano, and we want sort of a light left hand, and that will help with the shifts. And I'm also noticing, wait, you have a shift here, which I recommend going to second position. I really like that. But there's no space to do this shift. So I would make magic on this note. Just sort of let it taper, die away just a little bit, just enough to allow your hand to let go and make that shift. So I'll put a little star there. We're gonna make magic on that note. Or anywhere else you need to do a shift beforehand if you can't get it. Sometimes that little space makes all the difference. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this so that I'm looking more at the camera, and I'm gonna play. Hopefully I don't drop everything. Okay, so I could do something fancy, like stop this and you wouldn't see the process of me readjusting my angle. But then I'd have to edit the video and it makes it a lot harder to upload, so I'm not doing that. So here we go. So if there's a mistake, it's staying. Okay, so I think I need to get a little further away. Okay, so you can see. So I'm going to make that demonstration, okay? And I hope that you go back to the beginning of this when you're looking at the paper, pause it, and write some of these notes in your page if they help you. So now I'm going to go through and I'll just tell you what section I'm doing. So starting in that first, the theme, the vibrato, so. That's sort of a loose, slow vibrato. I'm just trying to wiggle these fingers and get the knuckle to do the moving and not the wrist. This is what a lot of us do in the very beginning. That wrist is really moving, but that's not what we want. What we want is for that little finger to move. Now, if you're doing a hand vibrato, your wrist will move, but it's not this way, okay? When we do this and the fingertips not moving, we're not getting the sound we want, and it doesn't feel good. So if you're not sure, you'll know when you do vibrato correctly, it feels right. It feels very easy and gentle. And it's about moving that finger right in that tiny little knuckle right there, that first little knuckle, to get that to sort of flatten out and come back, okay? And we can do it really, and this is pretty quick actually, so if you're having any trouble, just do it very slowly. If you're doing wrist, it might look a little more like that. If you're doing an arm motion, which I like to start with an arm motion personally, they're both good. They both work. You should be able to do both. I like to start with arm. I feel like it's easier. Okay. We're just trying to move that little knuckle. So don't be afraid to make a weird sound as you practice in a slow tempo. We make lots of weird sounds while we practice. So. So I'm exaggerating so you can hear what it would sound like to have a slow sounding vibrato. Okay. And then hopefully it would get easier. Now I'm going to demonstrate the martelé, variation 3. I think I added some notes. It's sort of from the middle to, it's in the upper half of the bow, and it comes from the elbow, really, in sort of a crispy, sharp motion. That's sort of hard to show in the camera. So hopefully it's definitely easier than bouncing on the string. So we're not bouncing yet. So let's talk about the Making Magic in variation 4 and variation, which one was it? 7. All right, so 1. So that's Making Magic. So let's try it again. The end of it, I'm just going to let it die away a little bit. And I'm going to keep the bow on the string. I'll just let it sort of come to a stop. Now if I keep going, magic. Okay, so just a little. So the note actually continues to ring, even though I stop the bow and I make a little magic, I let it taper off and die away. It's still ringing as I turn my bow and then begin the next section. So it is still playing for me, but I got a little break so I could get there. I still hear it. Do you hear it? It's still going. And then I turn my bow very silently, very quietly to get over there, gently. I let the tips sort of get very light here, and I can just turn it silently and then continue to add pressure. This should just be from about here to here in the bow and coming from the elbow. So a little bit like the martelé, sort of just moving from the elbow. That's not the right angle because your arm would be going more down, but it's moving from the elbow and not from the shoulder or from the wrist. Okay, so the whole bottom half of your arm is doing the movement. And it's just jamming along, chugging along like a train. Now, variation, let's see. You will see the whole bows in variation 6. So even though the notes are moving on some of those bows, the bow is really just doing 2 beat, 2 beat, 2 beat, 2 beat, 2 beat, 2 beat. Kind of hard to count that and play it. But it's 2 beats down and 2 beats up, even though the fingers are moving more in the up bow. The bow is not doing anything different. Scales help with that. Now, so we talked about making magic in variation 7. You'll hear the rhythm in variation 8 when I play it. Now, the even distribution, let's talk about variation 9 with the even distribution of the bow. So you have 2. So I want the first 4 notes in the first half of the bow, the last 4 notes in the second half, And it's sort of 1, 2, 3, 4 notes, and roughly 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So nice and even. What I don't want is all of them here, and maybe the last one for the, oops, I need to get to the frog and I want to zip there. So that's going to give us all kinds of weirdness. So nice and even. And if you're having trouble, you can separate these notes for the sake of practice. I used a little too much in the beginning. Let's try that again. Okay. Then you can do it faster. Eventually you smooth it out. That helps us out with that busy bow. It's pretty busy right there. It helps your bow line up with your fingers too. Okay, and then the light left hand in variation 10. I'm trying not to have a heavy hand. Because there's a lot of shifting, so. I'm really letting go. How can I show you that? So right there was watching the thumb. I'm not holding on at all. That helps the vibrato too. So a light left hand helps lots of things. Sometimes we need a strong left hand. It really depends on the section. So maybe variation 5, it wouldn't be as light. But the lighter we can keep it, the better our hand moves. Okay, I'm going to do a playthrough. Take note of what time it is on the video. According to me, it's about 22 minutes and 30 seconds. And I'm going to do this at 60. This is a slow tempo. So this is a goal, your first goal is to get to about this speed. Okay. Ready? And. Okay, I hope that helps. Happy practicing.